So what Nietzsche wants to do is call question to these notions, and he begins with this idea of the immortal soul, right? Which, again, like I say, cuts straight to the heart of Kantian ethics, or Millian ethics, insofar as it calls question to whether or not there's a single autonomous individual that can rationally control itself, right? So it calls question to the basis of morality. On your page 14, section 12, as he's criticizing specific prejudices of philosophers, right, he claims, it's of the atomism of the soul, bottom of the page. If you will allow me, I would use the phrase, this phrase to describe the belief that holds the soul to be something irretractable, eternal, indivisible, a monad, an atom. Science must cast out this belief, and confidentially, we do not need to get rid of the soul itself, nor do without one of our oldest and most valuable hypotheses, which the bungling naturalists tend to do, losing the soul as soon as they've touched on it. But the way is clear for a new and refined versions of the hypothesis about the soul in the future. Concepts such as the mortal soul, and the soul as the multiplicity of the subject, and the soul as the social construct of drives and emotions, will claim their rightful place in science. By putting an end to the superstitions that proliferated with nearly tropical abundance around the idea of the soul, the new psychologist has, of course, seemed to cast himself into a new desolation and a new distrust. It may be that the old psychologist had it easier, merrier, but he knows that he is thereby also condemned to inventing, and who knows, perhaps finding, right? So what Nietzsche wants to claim, right, rather than one pure individuality which exists somehow separate from our experiences, our actions, and our body, right, in the realm of appearances, what Nietzsche wants to claim is that this individuality, this subjectivity, is something way more complicated, right? And in fact, in this very interesting section, section 19, what Nietzsche presents to us is sort of a four-part analysis of what actually goes on when we exert free will. Remember, for Kant, he relied on this autonomous, rational individuality which was able to somehow extricate itself from its inclinations, its desires, and its experience in the world, and to somehow morally come up with this sort of a priori, purely rational judgment to determine, for example, if lying is right or wrong, if we've got a duty to tell the truth, a duty to preserve our lives, right? So what Nietzsche tells us is that, in fact, there are four competing and conflicting drives that go on when we will. This autonomous individual is not in a single simple position here, right? But rather, first we have sensations. We have this sort of feeling, sensual awareness of our surroundings. Secondly, he says on your page 18, just as we must recognize feeling, and indeed many kinds of feelings, as an ingredient of the will, slip there, so must we likewise recognize thinking. Every act of will, there's a commanding thought. We must not deceive ourselves that this thought can be separated from the act of willing. So we have sort of a conceptual understanding of our situation as we will as free beings. And then third, it's not just our sensations or our conceptual understanding, but rather it's an emotion. And Nietzsche says specifically an emotion of command that makes us feel good when we make a choice, when we act, right? When we choose, I'm going to do something really hard and it will be rewarding to me. I'm going to do my duty, as these ethicists have. And this is why we pat ourselves on the back for having a free will, right? But fourth, Nietzsche points out that the strangest thing about this will is that if there is something in us that commands, there's also something in us that obeys, right? So ultimately, what Nietzsche is presenting us with here is the soul as the multiplicity of the subject, right? We've got a plurality of souls that all, in a sense, compete, right? There's not one rational individual somewhere as an X in our head in some sort of transcendental realm that pays heed to some form of perfect truth, right? These are all bedtime stories that we tell ourselves. At least we have no evidence, right, to support the positing of a realm of the forms, essences, or ideas, and an autonomous individuality within ourselves, right? Even Kant said, not that we have this kind of autonomous individuality, but we have to, if we are going to act morally by his definition of it, we have to believe that we're autonomous individuals. So what Nietzsche wants to do, if you'll allow me here, right, is place us, right, in a situation where we are first and foremost, right, bodies with sensations, drives, desires, right, within a realm of not so much appearances but rather experience, right? And what's more, how we are able to master ourselves and this world that we find ourselves in is through spirit. Values, or more simply, belief. Right? And by, in a sense, creating for ourselves, right, out of our bodies and experiences, this plurality of ways of understanding some sort of consistent striving, some sort of consistent project. Right? Our egos, our souls, our subjectivity arises from our bodies as a means of commanding ourselves in the realm of experience. Right? But even as we command ourselves in one of those conflicted moral situations, we also obey. Right? So what Nietzsche says in the way of conclusion here, freedom of the will, that is just the word for that complex, pleasurable condition experienced by the person willing who commands, and simultaneously identifies himself with the one who executes the command. As such, he can share in enjoying the triumph over resistance, while secretly judging that it was actually his will that overcame the resistance. Thus the person willing adds to the pleasurable feeling as commander the pleasurable feelings of the successful executing instrument. The serviceable underwill or undersoul, our body, after all, is nothing but a social structure of many souls. What is occurring here occurs in every well-structured, happy community where the ruling class identifies with the success of the community as a whole. As we've said, every act of willing is simply a matter of commanding and obeying based on a social structure of many souls. For this reason, a philosopher should claim the right to comprehend willing from within the sphere of ethics that is understood as the theory of hierarchical relationships among which the phenomena life has its origins, right? So really within the act of the will, there's not this one pure soul or ego who simply commands, right? It's not as though it's a simple thing to make a rational choice. What Nietzsche wants to claim here is that really when we make a rational choice, when we will, right, really what it is this complex of different factors vying for control over our actions, right? And the one that results, right, as the commander is the one that we congratulate ourselves for.